So we have a disabled car here in the shop today. What we're dealing with here is a faulty coil, or we believe to be a faulty coil. The vehicle did start. It ran briefly for about 2 minutes and then it died and would not restart. It sat in the shop for about a week and still would not restart. So this vehicle particularly had a problem when the engine warmed up. It would stall out and backfire. We replaced the ignition control module last year. No avail. Didn't do any good. It too can also cause some of the performance issues that I was experiencing, but that was simply not the case here, and it did trip a code, but it did not remedy the situation at hand. The service light, engine light did go out, but still didn't get it fixed. So we are dealing with, we're going to try and remove this coil here. This is a 305 TBI, okay? You know, it's just to the right hand side of the exhaust gas recirculator valve. So I mean, it's directly beside the distributor. If you guys are ever working on one of these, this is where it is. So you're going to have a power lead. There's a clip on the right hand side and there's a clip on the back. So you're going to want to take two fingers and kind of pry them away from the connector, and they will separate. So like I say, just like this, you can't confuse them. They only go on one way, so you can just you know, get those out of the way of each other. This here, I believe, is well, there's actually a wire in here. There's only one wire in here. Yeah, see, if there was another wire in there, it'd be for a tachometer, but this vehicle doesn't have it. So anyway, it's very straightforward. It's basically a 10-minute job. There is two fasteners down below, if you can see them, and we'll go ahead and remove it from the vehicle here. So a 13mm socket is required for this. I'm using a deep socket because if I used a shallow socket with a regular length extension bar, it'd actually be too long. I'd be hitting the firewall. And with a short extension and a shallow socket, the accelerator cable was in my way. So I'm using a deep socket with a short extension, and it's just the perfect length for this. Okay, once you remove the other fastener in behind, there's only two of them total, you can remove the coil, disconnect your lead to the distributor cap, and you can remove the unit from the vehicle. You can also next dismantle the bracket. Some of them I do believe come with a new bracket on here. I can't really remember, and I don't have my new part yet. It is still in transit. I ordered it from the great state of Ohio. Okay, so unboxing our unit. This is just an Airtex coil. You know, they make very cheap aftermarket prices. I shouldn't say cheap, it's affordable. When it comes to automotive parts, everything is affordable, not cheap. Well, that's the way I look at things anyway. So anyway, it's an Airtex Wells coil. I mean, it only costs $9. So inside this kit, you'll have a little instruction booklet. I thought there'd be some dielectric grease, but I guess no, you wouldn't need it for something like this. But anyway, there is an instruction booklet, and there's also a bracket with some hardware inside there that won't fit this particular car. It won't fit this engine. So anyway, I'm going to have to use, which I thought I'd have to in the first place, is use the old mounting hardware. So I'm going to clean this up with a wire wheel just for the sake of it. I'm going to go ahead and dismantle the bracket off the coil, and we'll go ahead and put the bracket on the new one once it is all cleaned up. That'll polish up very nicely. I just like to have this all cleaned up because, well, you know, the coil is bad, but I mean, all this corrosion really probably wouldn't help it much either. So, and another thing too, we'll check the connectors, make sure they're all good. If your connectors are all good as well, then you really have nothing else to worry about in that aspect. Okay, so as you're taking apart your bracket assembly here, you're going to want to make sure that you note the configuration of how your bracket is supposed to be mounted. That way when you have everything attached and you go over to your vehicle, you're going to be able to mount it to your engine, and there's not going to be, it's like, oh, you know what, I just put on the brackets on backwards. So just note the configuration, make sure you have adequate workspace on your workbench, and install your bracket. So it was actually a 7mm. I'm using a nut driver here and a wrench in order to remove them and install the nuts. So I had said that it was a 1/4 inch. That's not the case. It's actually a 7mm that'll properly loosen off the fasteners. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and install a new coil on the vehicle, and we'll get this engine running again. Okay, so installing our coil now. I'm going to go ahead and torque these down. Doesn't have to be overly tight. Go ahead and tighten them down and hook up our connectors and our main lead that goes to the distributor cap. Next, go ahead and connect our power leads for our coil. Okay, so now we can go ahead and start the vehicle. If the vehicle doesn't start, very simple. Take a few measures and just check your cables first, and go from there before you start assuming the worst. Okay, so we have no fire. Okay, so it was actually one of those weird moments where the car actually didn't restart. See, there's an importance to checking all other components. In fact, the coil wasn't really to blame here in this situation, but in fact the rotor. You see anything somewhat quite peculiar with this? Yeah, the actual part that makes contact with the notches inside the distributor cap, the contacts inside the distributor cap, well, this thing's totally gone. I don't even know where it went. So, this is what happened with the vehicle. I have no idea where the actual piece went. Like, it's gone. Has to be in here somewhere, but anyway, so that was actually the peculiar thing here that made the vehicle stop running. So, like I said before, it's always imperative that you guys check all other ignition components, your spark plug wires and all that, because I mean, this turns out to be the fault. Now, of course, I wanted to replace the coil anyway because the engine did die when it warmed up, so usually it indicates that a coil is bad. But the day that this car stalled and wouldn't restart, well, this was to blame. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a new cap and rotor on the car, seeing as how I do have one here. Always got to carry spare parts, new parts. And we're going to go ahead and put this in here and get this car running here again. Hopefully this time it'll actually run for sure. Now, because there was a busted piece of plastic from the old rotor inside the actual distributor shaft, I tapped it out with just a small screwdriver. A piece of plastic came right out of there, no problem. This might be a problem that you might incur one day on your endeavors of working on one of these engines. You never know. But right now, I'm just going to clean this up as well. This distributor, I do not like it at all, because I mean, there's parts here that are actually very well rusted. I really would recommend replacing the distributor if this is somebody else's vehicle. I'm not replacing it right now because I just don't have one, and but later on down the road I probably will. And it takes some compressed air after, and I'm going to clean out where the ignition control module rests. We can see a little bit of rusty corrosion deposits there. I just replaced that not too long ago. You can actually tell that the distributor cap isn't in bad shape. The distributor button right here seems to be in good shape. It still springs nicely, but I really, well, we got a little bit of carbon track here, a bit of corrosion. We can take note, this one here is wore down pretty good. So yeah, this cap is definitely pretty well at the end of its life. I would replace it if you guys ever see one of these like this. Another thing too you want to check for is cracks. If you have a distributor cap that has cracked plastic, you know, it'll warm up and flex, and you know, it can cause all kinds of wonky stuff to happen, or it could cause moisture to get inside the cap, and this might cause hard starting when it's warm, when it's damp outside, especially in the springtime, or it may not start at all. You might be out there one morning taking a vacuum cleaner and taking the vacuum hose and putting it on the blower end of your vacuum and blowing cold air on your distributor cap to dry out the components inside. I've had to do this many times. As a matter of fact, I had to do it to my Honda Civic 1.6 liter. Distributor components were done inside, moisture would get in, and so I take a shop vac, invert the hose so it would actually blow cold air instead of suck, and blow the components, and that would usually get the car to run. Otherwise, on a day like today where it's really rainy and cold and damp, the car wouldn't start at all without a little bit of ingenuity, as I like to call it. So if you see something like this, you know, it's time. You know, if you're doing a coil job anyway, maybe it'd be in your best interest to ask your auto parts clerk and get yourself new plug wires, spark plugs. You might as well do the whole kit and caboodle if you're going with something like this. A repair like this, you know, new spark plug wires, you may be looking at about 250 bucks. So, but like I say, it's worth it in the long run. You know, you'll have peak performance and a lot better fuel economy if your components are, like mine, in fact, due and in desperate need of replacement. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install my new rotor here, get started, and get this vehicle actually running in real time for a change. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and install my new rotor, and it's very simple. It's just a slide in and push down kind of a unit. Sometimes you just got to take your time and line up the notches. It might take a little bit of time. The most important thing to note is not to force it in there. You don't want to break it. It is only plastic, so take your time with it. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and install our cap. You're going to notice here that I actually just pulled all the wires off. If you do this enough, you can just remember that the actual firing order. If not, there's if you Google image firing order 305 Chevrolet and just hit Google Images, there's actually a whole bunch of pictures that'll come up, and they're color coded. And if you're colorblind, it'll actually tell you which wire goes where and what cylinder is which. So I actually have about 1 million printouts of various engines that I have here, and don't even have, of various engines and firing orders. I keep them in a catalog here, actually on the back shelf, so I can just turn to a page, look at the firing order, and then just go ahead and plug my wires where they need to go. So then that way I'm not fighting around, because at the end of the day, or well, actually during the job, it's very tedious to try and get all these wires back in order here while the cap is still, you know, you only have so much clearance here, and you're fighting with the cap, you're fighting with the wires, you're fighting with the throttle assembly. So it's like all the wires are here, so all I do is just have a diagram ready and just go ahead and tear everything apart. Very straightforward. So I just go ahead and put my cap back on, and I'll look at my diagrams and I'll get everything hooked up here before you know it. Alright, so connecting our last wire, spark plug wire. Go ahead and install our wire for our coil, and reinstall our coil. I removed it again for clarity purposes. Okay, so I got everything plugged in here. I'm not sure if it's gonna go. Every time I was cranking the engine over, the injectors were drawing more fuel in there, so I'm not sure if it's flooded up a little bit. We're gonna try it. So if you experience maybe your engine backfires, or you know, you can definitely feel that it's running rough, you might have a spark plug wire on backwards, so just keep an eye open for that as well. Alright, so I'll go ahead and try it, see what we got. Oh, I got to connect the battery here. Hang on a second. Yeah, see, that's another thing I forgot to mention. Always disconnect your battery when you're working on any kind of chassis electrical equipment, such as, you know, your distributor, any ignition components, anything electrical. You want to do that, and you know, connect them up when you're finished that task. And go ahead and try this in real time here. Alright, let's see what we got. Okay. Okay, so we got ignition. Might have a backwards plug wire. I think it's just flooded. The engine won't run very well either with the air cleaner off. It might buck and chuck a little bit too, so if you're dealing with a TBI, it might run rough.